In the 18th and 19th centuries, Britain developed a huge appetite for Chinese goods. The most important of these goods was tea. People all across Britain, from the richest lords to the simplest workers, loved drinking tea. It became a central part of their daily life and culture. They also desired other luxury items from China, such as beautiful silk fabrics and delicate porcelain dishes. These items were seen as symbols of wealth and good taste. Britain could not produce these things itself, so it had to buy them directly from China. This created a strong demand for a trade relationship with the distant and mysterious Chinese Empire. However, the trade between Britain and China was not balanced at all. The British bought enormous quantities of tea, silk and porcelain, sending shiploads of silver to China to pay for them. The problem was that China did not want to buy much from Britain in return. The Chinese believed their country was self-sufficient and had everything it needed. They saw British manufactured goods like woolen textiles as inferior to their own products. The Qing Dynasty rulers in China were very proud and controlled foreign trade very strictly. They only allowed foreign merchants to trade in one single port, Canton, which made it very difficult for the British to sell their goods. This one-sided trade created a massive economic problem for Britain. A huge amount of silver was flowing out of the country and into China's treasury. British officials and merchants became very worried. They saw their nation's wealth draining away, all for the love of tea. They needed to find a product that the Chinese people would want to buy in large amounts. This would help them balance the trade and get their silver back. The search for this special product would soon lead them down a very dark and destructive path, one that would change the course of history for both nations forever. The British found their solution in a powerful and addictive drug opium. Opium was grown in British-controlled India, making it easy for the British East India Company to produce and transport. They realized that they could sell this drug to the Chinese people. At first, opium was used in small amounts as a medicine in China. However, a new method of smoking it made it much more addictive. British merchants, working with private traders, began smuggling vast quantities of opium into China. They sold the drug along the coast, creating a network of illegal trade that grew larger every year. This new trade was incredibly profitable for Britain. Soon the flow of silver completely reversed. Instead of silver leaving Britain to pay for tea, it was now flowing out of China to pay for opium. The trade imbalance that had troubled the British for so long was finally solved, but at a terrible cost. Millions of Chinese people, from poor peasants to government officials and even soldiers, became addicted to the drug. The addiction destroyed families, ruined careers, and caused widespread social problems. The country's health and productivity began to suffer deeply as more and more people fell into the grip of opium addiction. The Chinese government was horrified by the effects of the opium trade. The Daoguang Emperor saw that the drug was not only harming his people, but also draining his empire's silver reserves. The very foundations of his society were being threatened by this foreign poison. He worried about the moral decay of his people and the economic weakness it caused. The emperor and his officials knew they had to take strong action to stop the illegal trade. They viewed the British merchants as nothing more than drug dealers who were profiting from the misery of the Chinese population. The stage was being set for a major confrontation. The British merchants, however, did not see themselves as criminals. They argued that they were simply engaging in free trade, a principle they deeply believed in. In their view, if the Chinese people wanted to buy opium, they should be free to do so. They ignored the devastating social consequences and focused only on their profits. They pressured the British government to protect their business interests. This clash of values, China's desire to protect its people versus Britain's demand for free trade, made the conflict almost inevitable. One side saw a moral crisis, while the other saw a golden business opportunity. In 1839, the Daoguang Emperor decided he had seen enough. He appointed an honest and determined official named Lin Zexu to go to Canton and completely stop the opium trade. Lin Zexu was a man of high moral character and was serious about his mission. When he arrived, he took immediate and decisive action. He demanded that the foreign merchants, mostly British, turn over all of their opium. He wrote a letter to Queen Victoria asking her to stop her subjects from selling the harmful drug. He believed in a just and moral solution to the crisis that was destroying his country. When the British traders refused to hand over their opium, Lin Zexu took a bold step. He blockaded the foreign merchants inside their factories or warehouses in Canton. He cut off their food and water supplies, making it clear that they would not be allowed to leave until they surrendered the drug. After several weeks of this standoff, the British Superintendent of Trade, Charles Elliot, gave in. He ordered the merchants to surrender their entire stock of opium. Lin Zexu's men then destroyed over 20,000 chests of opium, a massive amount, by mixing it with lime and salt and washing it out to sea. This action was celebrated in China as a great victory against a moral evil. However, in Britain it was seen as an outrage. The British government viewed the destruction of the opium as the illegal seizure and destruction of British property. The powerful merchants who had lost their valuable cargo demanded compensation and military action. They painted Lin Zexu's actions as an insult to the British flag and a violation of international trade principles. The debate in the British Parliament was fierce, but the pro-war factions, supported by the merchants, eventually won. They decided to send a powerful naval fleet to China to seek revenge and force China to pay. Britain's goal was not just to get money for the destroyed opium, they wanted more. They wanted to force China to open up more ports for trade, not just Canton. They demanded a fixed and fair tariff on their goods. They also wanted China to give them an island off the coast where they could conduct their trade freely and safely. On the other side, China's goal was simple: to stop the opium trade and maintain its sovereignty and control over its own country. They did not want to fight a war, but they were not willing to let foreigners poison their people for profit. These conflicting goals put the two nations on a direct path to war. The First Opium War began in 1839 when the British fleet arrived in China. The conflict was very one-sided. Britain had a modern, steam-powered navy with advanced cannons and rifles. The Chinese military, on the other hand, used outdated ships called junks and traditional weapons. The British Navy could easily sail up China's rivers and attack major cities. They captured key ports and blockaded important waterways, crippling the Qing dynasty's ability to move supplies and collect taxes. The Chinese soldiers fought bravely, but they were no match for the superior technology and military tactics of the British forces. The war ended in 1842 with a decisive British victory. The Chinese government was forced to sign the Treaty of Nanking, the first of what became known as the Unequal Treaties. This treaty was completely dictated by the British. China had to pay a huge sum of money to Britain to cover the cost of the destroyed opium and the war itself. They were forced to open 5 new ports to foreign trade. Most significantly, China had to give the island of Hong Kong to Britain. This treaty marked the beginning of a period that the Chinese later called the Century of Humiliation. Unfortunately, the Treaty of Nanking did not solve the underlying problems. The opium trade continued, and even grew, as the treaty did not explicitly ban it. Tensions remained high, and a second Opium War broke out from 1856 to 1860, this time with France joining Britain against China. This war was even more devastating for China. It ended with the burning of the Emperor's magnificent summer palace in Beijing by British and French troops. The resulting treaties forced China to open even more ports, legalize the opium trade, and allow foreign embassies in its capital city. The Opium Wars had profound and lasting consequences for both nations. For Britain, the wars secured its economic interests and expanded its global empire. Hong Kong became a major hub for British trade in East Asia. For China, the wars were a national trauma. They exposed the weakness of the Qing dynasty and began a long period of foreign domination and internal conflict. The wars shattered China's traditional view of itself as the center of the world and forced it to confront the power of the industrializing West. The memory of these wars continues to shape China's view of the world to this day.